Hi, everyone. You are very welcome to the next episode in our Work From Anywhere series, The Great Disruption. So many themes to talk about today. I'm delighted to be having Meyer from Zoku and Mark Phillips from NomadStays, two people that are really on the cutting edge of where the travel and hospitality industry is going to go, especially when you talk about remote work, work from anywhere, and how they're seeing trends in the industry. We've obviously seen in the last couple of weeks a couple of major things happen. Number one, we've seen the Airbnb announcement. That has so many implications for a couple of things, for travel, for obviously remote work and work from anywhere. We've also got them talking about, for example, tax tools that they may develop to help facilitate companies around us as well. And you can also see from the product redesign that they've done as well, really looking at the space and seeing where it can go. Another very, very interesting statistic that came out was actually a recent article by Skift and Rafa Ali and the whole Skift team. Basically, one of the quotes they had in that article, and you can see it on our social media channels, for example, was how they spoke about American Airlines pre-pandemic had about between 20 and 25% of their travel was mixed, as in a mixture of leisure and business, basically. So leisure travel. If you look at it now in recent weeks, what kind of statistics are they seeing? Well, they're seeing it over doubling to between 50 and 55% of travel. Where is that going to go? Is it going to increase even further? Who knows? But even if it just stays where it is, this shows you the power of this particular segment. And with all that in mind, I would love to bring on our wonderful group of speakers. I'd like to invite Mark and Hans to give a bit of introduction. Maybe, Mark, would you be able to give us a quick intro to yourself and the whole NomadStays team?
Sure. So thanks so much, John. G'day, everybody. Mark Phillips here. So NomadStays is the startup we opened a bit over 2 years ago now, after a couple of years, actually about 7 years, nomading around a heap of countries. I think I've visited 105 countries now. But after 7 years of nomading, we decided that we were going to solve one of the problems, the big problems of nomads, which was to find affordable locations that were work ready when you work digitally. So my accent is Australian, if you're trying to work out where in the world I come from. And I'm sitting in France under the French tech visa, which I'm sure you've heard from previous episodes with John about visas and so forth, after bringing a startup to Europe. So that's where we fit in.
Very interesting. Thanks very much, Mark, for that intro. And Hans, tell me more about yourself and Zoku. You've got so much going on there. I'm looking forward to both of you tapping into, such as your white paper that you released from Zoku. And so tell us more about Zoku itself and the idea.
So thanks for having me, John, and nice to be here together with Mark. Zoku is a new category in the hotel industry. It's a hybrid routine, a home and an office, topped with hotel services, and what we call the social buzz of a thriving neighborhood. I think the interesting thing for the conversation here is that actually when I started Zoku, I wanted to create something for people who need to live and work in a city between 5 days and 3 months. And at that start, I decided to live as my target audience for 6 months. So I went 2 months Buenos Aires, 2 months Bali, 2 months Washington to DC to really understand, and that was in 2009, to understand the global nomadic lifestyle. So we were pretty ahead of time. COVID definitely acted as a catalyst for these kind of developments. And currently we're operating Zoku's in Amsterdam, Vienna, in Copenhagen, and in the end of this year in Paris as well. Thank you.
Very interesting. So you can see, two businesses that are at the cusp of this emerging segment. And maybe you've got me triggered a question, and this is one I hadn't actually thought of before, but would like to get your thoughts on it. What are the different segments within, remote work or work from anywhere or leisure travel? What are the segments that you guys are seeing? Maybe Mark, could you start us off on that? I'd like both your thoughts on this, because it's such a new area. I'm curious that who do you guys cater for with your business, but what are the segments that you're seeing emerging?
John, I don't think we've got anywhere near enough time to get into that one. We at NomadStays, so we're across 64 countries at this point in time. We have mapped somewhere between 20 and 30 sub-niches of people that might fall into this remote worker, digital nomad, leisure sort of environment, including expats, which is, for us, that's not that important because expats generally don't travel that much. But there is a whole lot of psychographic differences between a lot of these people about how they see the world. You know, are they just looking for a change of scenery every month or two? Are they actually looking to explore the world? Are they trying to build a career? Or is it a year gap, which they don't want to tell their parents is actually a year of having fun, but they'll tell their parents that they're nomads because it sounds better. There is all sorts of crossovers from established markets, but I guess the main guts of it all is that people are trying to build careers while not having to go to an office. And some of those are going a lot further afield and taking advantage, and others a bit more sedate.
Yeah, so like work is no longer a place, taking that line, taking that concept and actually translating into the opportunities that can be available around the world through travel. And I guess, is that something you're also seeing, Hans? Like what kind of segments are you seeing and what segments do you target with Zoku?
Well, I think it's interesting what Mark says, because I completely agree with him. I mean, there's just not one target audience. There are many different ones. But I think the biggest difference I currently see is that there used to be most of the time self-employed people within startups, etc. But now actually you see something shifting, that the global nomads or digital nomads also become people working from even the bigger companies. And I think Airbnb is a great example, that they allow their people to work from anywhere. But previously, it was a little bit linked to either you're a freelancer or a digital nomad or maybe a small remote working company. But now you also see that the bigger companies, the professionals that used to travel for business regularly, also starting to adapt this lifestyle. And I think that's a big shift. And that's please go ahead.
Yeah, no, that I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's also one of the points that jumps out at me is Gonzalo Hall. He had mentioned how in Madeira, I think pre-pandemic, what you would call the corporate nomads were maybe less than 10% of all remote workers and nomads visiting Madeira to visit the, let's say, nomad communities there. Whereas now it's close to 50%. So again, reflecting that shift that we're also seeing as well from the American Airlines numbers, seeing that as well in the actual co-working communities, the nomad communities that are there. So I think the needs, I'm guessing, for those communities are very, very different, I'm guessing. So that's an interesting one to reflect on. But I think looking back in this last couple of weeks, the Airbnb work from anywhere policy, what a fantastic marketing tool and also a recruitment tool. They had over 800,000 visitors to their page in the first couple of days. What are you seeing, both of you, from this? Like, how is this going to impact the kind of travel and accommodation market, Mark?
I think you need to look at the big picture. We've got this great resignation that's going on at the moment. We're looking at a whole lot of people that are leaving corporate world to do something else. Some of them will go back into jobs. They might go to smaller companies that are more flexible. They also might start their own business. So you've got societal changes around employment happening. You've also got a built-up demand from the pandemic. And for some extent, many businesses didn't want to open their offices for the last couple of years. So people got used to living elsewhere. Now that they are opening their offices, some of these big companies are trying to pull people back. But we've got a shortage of labour around a lot of the world. So it's now getting highly competitive. If you want to hold on to your good talent, it's going to be interesting to see whether remote work is, or how much of the society is going to value remote work compared to higher incomes from, top locations.
And how would you see that, Hans, as well? What was your sense when you saw that work from anywhere policy from Airbnb? Because to be fair, there were other companies such as Twitter and whatnot that were already doing this before. But how did you see this? Did you see did this kind of capture the attention of the market? And how do you see the impact of this and also for your own business?
Well, you were referring about the travel market. I actually, and also a little bit in line with Mark says, I would refer to the labor market.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? Suppose you're a software developer, And in the last 2 years, you have been developing your software from home. Actually, you were not able to go to the office. So this cool office with this great sushi restaurant, all those kind of different perks that people, that companies developed to give you a reason to come to the office instead of working at home, were basically gone. And then those companies are struggling. How do I keep my talent in? And then they were thinking about, okay, maybe we have to redefine our employee benefits then. And then one of the employee benefits that is going to be redefined is to allow people to work remotely or to work from anywhere. And that's actually kind of a development that we see bigger. I think the interesting thing is, of course, Twitter started with it, but Airbnb, that they allow their people as well. I mean, it's just basically adding up. And I'm sure that other companies will follow for the simple reason that the labor market currently is so competitive that it just have to. So, I mean, this is just what's going to happen.
I was speaking to somebody recently on this, and what they said that it's actually less, in many cases, less so the typical Silicon Valley tech companies, the bigger ones like the FANGs that are leading the way in this. It's actually almost like the P&Gs and the Unilevers, because those companies, to try and compete to hire developers that would otherwise go to a Google, they've got to go the extra mile on the the workplace flexibility, the remote work, the work from anywhere. If they can offer something like that, they have a better chance. Like you said, on the benefit, like both of you have talked about the benefit side, they have a better chance of being able to get the talent. A question here from or Mark from Christy, and please feel free any of you to ask any questions. I think more people would be willing to take less salary in exchange for more freedom and autonomy. And to be fair, I mean, I'm guessing this is something you're both seeing and hearing in the market as well, that it really is coming down to, yes, salary is important, but actually that flexibility. And the flexibility is more than just a place, I guess. It's also synchronous versus asynchronous. It's how you work and how you work and build trust as a team, I guess. Is that something you're also seeing as well, both of you?
We are. There are, and it's maybe downsizing to smaller companies, more family-orientated companies. It may be starting your own freelancing business. It might be starting your own startup or a passion. I guess what people are objecting to is going back into a routine in a single city, in a single location that they're expected to work at. And when you hear people refer to their work environment, it's always in a negative, and their holiday environment traditionally is where they had their fun. So you've got part of the year that was hard, another part was fun. Now we're focused on lifestyle, and we can actually do both together. And it changes the psychology a little bit, and it takes a while to adjust that, particularly with some of these restrictions on pandemics and things like that.
Yeah, of course. And tying back then to, you talk about the trends like that, where things are going to go. Because for me, I'm always fascinated by the future of this, because we've got where we are now, where it's going to go. I saw as well, Hans, that you recently launched a white paper in the last few months with Zoku. What were some of the key takeaways or key insights that came out of that would be relevant here?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, 2 months after the lockdown here in the Netherlands, I called a few HR managers from bigger companies, Microsoft and all these kind of companies. I said, okay, how does this remote working, how does it work out? And they said, amazing, because people don't have a commute, they have a better work-life balance, and even some companies saw productivity rise. I did the same thing 1 year later, after almost a year in lockdowns, and then I heard another story. Yes, they very much believe still in working remotely, but if people don't see each other anymore, they also saw the suffering that people did feel less engaged to the company, less engaged to their teams, less collaboration, less sharing of knowledge, and also less innovation. So basically what sprung up is that, yes, remote working, work from anywhere is fantastic, but at the same time, you have to bring people now and then together. So the title of the white paper was "The Future of Work Needs Human Connection," and that's something that we believe very strongly in. I feel that hybrid working in the future will be kind of a choice for a kind of a team that can decide themselves. So if the team all live in Amsterdam, they might come to the office 2 to 3 days a week. But if they live in different parts in the Netherlands, they might come to Amsterdam for 3-4 days every other 2 weeks. And even if they live all over Europe, they might come to Amsterdam for a week every month. So these kind of developments, those were basically very much important. So we focused in the white paper on the remote work experiment. What were the benefits, but also what were the the not so nice elements, which I just explained. Then we dived into how will the hybrid work model evolve, which I briefly explained. And last but not, the future of global talent, which is really tapping into this work from anywhere conversation that a lot of people actually want.
Well, let's take that to the next stage then, Hans. What does that mean for you guys, for example, in Zoku? Because on the one hand, you've got, that really means that you've got to fundamentally redesign the office experience. People like Dave Cairns and many more talk about this. But then you also need to redesign, when you have your company retreats or you meet up once a quarter or once a year, like how do you retool your hotel for that? What do you do to service that? Do you service that, or how do you deal with that, for example, in the Zoku experience?
Well, the thing is actually, when Zoko came to the market, it was actually a little bit too early. If you look now to the zeitgeist of today, Zoko really fits in because we were already focused on hotel stays, short stays, and also long stays. And for example, our room product is the Zoku Loft, and the Zoku Loft is a hybrid routine, a home and an office, because you can hide the bed. So during COVID, a lot of companies who actually didn't allow their people to go to the office closed a deal with us that during the day that people could work in the Zoku Lofts, which we can sell out during the night as a sleeping area as well. And we basically developed for this market 3 different propositions. So the first one is hybrid work solutions for teams that actually need to come together after being separate for a long time. But also the pop-up office is basically for remote working companies or distributed teams that need to come together for a week or so. And we have all the facilities here as well that you can actually organize your team gathering over here. And last but not least, we closed recently already a deal with a company that want to allow their people to work from anywhere, whether it's in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, or Vienna, or in Paris. And that's basically a one-stop shop for the company where we facilitate those people, not only from a work point of view, but we also help them to immerse themselves in the local culture of Amsterdam, Vienna, Copenhagen, or Paris. What makes work from anywhere so interesting? I mean, I've experienced work from anywhere myself, and what I like the most is, and I did it 3 weeks ago in Tulum, in Mexico. Start off your day at 7 o'clock in the morning, work until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then go to the beach. I mean, what I like is that.
Yeah, it's great. No, for me, what's jumping out there is, from a business model perspective as well, is you've got your hotel that you can basically rent out the loft at night, but then during the day you can use it as a co-working space to rent it off to potentially different customers. So I mean, it also flexibilizes the room and the business model. So I can imagine there's a lot of attraction, but then you have to have a really good setup for that, I guess, don't you? But that's an interesting one. I think at a big picture, you talked about, Hans, there, for example, about culture being very, very important. But then, Mark, I'd like to ask you, for destinations themselves, culture is going to be a big part of the attraction. But what do destinations in general need to be doing to make themselves more attractive to digital nomads and international remote workers? Like, one of the things I'm hearing lately is that the prices have gone up, for housing, but also for accommodation and whatnot, that the digital nomads that had gotten places for very, very cheaply are now actually having to pay a bit more through the nose. How are you seeing that? What do destinations need to do to attract digital nomads?
Again, it's a huge topic there, John. If we go back 2 years ago, before the Great Reset sort of kicked in, the nomads were traveling. They tended to be on the lower end of the budget area. They would often choose countries with low cost of living. They would often use that opportunity to start up their own business or start freelancing, or just get a better lifestyle, better balance. A lot of burnout people went and did this sort of half-time work, which turns out to be 30, 40 hours a week for these sort of people. But, they had to leave home to get that sort of balance into their life. And now we've got this wave of employees and so forth kicking through, and they've got a lot more money. That's certainly true. And then we've got a supply constraint, which is really having a big impact. So I think depending on whether you're trying to attract a mob of digital nomads or a few digital nomads or a particular style of worker, it changes.
Yeah.
We were talking with Saloniki in Greece a couple of nights ago, a new business that's set up there. And we've done some business in Saloniki, but, people don't really think of Saloniki as a great nomad spot. It's not really might be Greece's second largest business, but it's not on the map, even though it's quite a large city. But up the road, over 2 hours away in Bulgaria, you've got Bansko. You've got 15,000 people in Bansko, and it's a huge nomad spot. You go to this little spot down the bottom of Spain there. You've got Tarifa. It's not that pretty, but it's a major hangout for kite surfers. So you've got this group of passionate sports people that are now building their business and doing that stuff in places. You've got workers looking to explore remote areas and keep away from tribes. And so nomads will come to explore the area without necessarily having a community. And Madeira sort of picked that up as well. I spent a couple of months on Madeira last year, and it's a stunningly beautiful place.
Well, you're just trying to tap into that. If you look at reflecting back on the Airbnb new product launch, where they've broken all their experiences into, I think 56 defined segments. Yep. If I listen to what you're saying, the sense I get is actually tapping into the niche community for a destination and really tapping into that community that suits that destination is one of the most powerful ways to do it. Obviously, for the bigger cities will cater to multiple different niches, but for those kind of smaller towns and destinations that are really picking the niche, be it surfing like Air Sierra or be it whatever it might be, is a really powerful way to look at it.
Events based is another big one. People will come into town for an event and they'll stop for a month now. Say, okay, I'm here for this really good thing. It might be a business event, it might be a music festival, whatever their passion is. And now I'm going to immerse myself into the culture of the town and learn more.
Yeah.
So how am I going to learn this? Well, who am I going to talk to, particularly if it's foreign language?
Yeah.
And this is where our co-working centres and things kick off. So, when we opened with co-working centres. We introduced genres, as we call it, a bit like Airbnb's copied with their 56 categories. Because these are the things that people have the opportunity to spend more time chasing now, rather than just a bed for the night and choosing a colour of a bedroom. That's gone. That era has finished with this new surge of lifestyle, bleisure, workation, whatever language you want to call of travel.
Actually, that's a very, very, very interesting point to then reflect back on. And then if you look at it then, Hans, what are you seeing that destinations need to be doing? What destinations are doing a great job here at attracting these digital nomads? The different places you have around the world. What are the ones that stand out?
Well, I think the ones that Mark is mentioning are doing great, but also some bigger cities like Miami is doing, I think, a great job.
What's the secret to Miami?
Well, it's definitely not close to the sea. It's a little bit back over there. Mark, fill me in. What do you think is?
It's a new startup scene.
Yeah.
So Miami has pushed really hard into the startup scene. We're seeing a movement away from the San Francisco and Bay Area. It's been talked about for a while. It was originally said it was too expensive, but having been in the Bay a couple of weeks ago, I think there's some bigger shifts going on where you've got competition from places like Miami, Austin, New York, who've niched and specialised. In Miami's case, they've got a weather advantage over much of the US. They've got a lifestyle advantage, and now they've got shall we say, a tax and a startup community that's attracting a lot of tech for probably the first time they've had in a long time.
Fascinating. But again, it goes back to the point of figuring out that niche. I'm seeing also as well, Daniel Paulson is making a good point here about the Digital Nomad Association for Croatia. They've had Jan de Jong on the team there. They've had certainly some success. And again, come back, also seeing Nacho Rodriguez and Gonzalo Hall and what they're doing in Gran Canaria, Madeira, in Portugal, and building that community. Very interesting to see where they how they get on. I'm seeing also as well, Christy mentioned places like Osijek in Croatia, so that they're attracting some very interesting segments of digital nomads and remote workers. Reflecting back on this, then I'm trying to think of what are the things maybe that we're maybe missing in this conversation. And what I mean by that is, are there second and third degree impacts of this that we need to be talking more about or thinking about? For example, if you look at, if you get a destination that it all of a sudden attracts, becomes a huge attraction and honeypot for digital nomads, if it overplays its hand, well, it's going to end up pushing up real estate prices and pushing locals out. Look at the Airbnb effect in certain places, for example. That's just one example. But are there other aspects that we need to be thinking about, for example, that I might not have mentioned?
Well, you could start it from a negative point of view, but you can even start from a positive point of view. So
That's
what
true.
our experience is that if people stay here and they want to work from anywhere, from a location like here in Amsterdam, they are very much engaged also to participate in the community, and even, for example, to do voluntary work here in the community, which we also are facilitating. The interesting thing is that if you, there was a lot of debate about tourism into cities, people just going into the city, get drunk and go out. Well, that's the kind of a tourist that we have in Amsterdam. But we feel that the people who are basically here as a digital nomad, they are participating in the community.
Yeah.
They also are open to, we have also local Amsterdam members, because we have a co-working concept stacked on our business model as well. So there's those local Amsterdam people who basically use Zoko as their day office. They interact with those international nomads, which is very much interesting. And there's a lot of sharing of knowledge and experience over there. So far, I think this segment is extremely interesting for cities that have been overflown by a lot of cheap tourism and just still want to bring those people into their economies and into their neighborhoods. But after what I see, that those people are far more interested to also learn about the local culture, to learn to know the local people, and also give back.
Well, we had. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, every area has its natural draw cards, and one of the really nice things about the nomad remote worker market is that because it's not a short stay industry, each location, and I'm talking mainly about what we used to call disconnected nodes, those locations that were not close to airports and bus train stations and things like that. They're not on the normal tourist flow. These secondary locations, these more remote regional areas, they've got an opportunity to become a node in their own right and attract significant amounts of money, not necessarily people, because remember, nomads are staying around for a number of weeks, if not months. So they're dropping a lot of money when they're staying. And so these other locations can suddenly arrive without having to have all the traditional leisure-based connections that fast-moving people needed.
Brilliant point, Mark. I mean, one of the things we often talk about is how, if you look at it from an intercultural perspective, but also from a business model perspective of the destinations, a cruise passenger, what happens? They come in at the busiest time of the day, they cause a fair amount of friction. Yes, they do spend, but for the impact and the friction of the locals is quite high. The traffic, etc. is caused. It's the same thing, for example, for the stag parties and hen parties, for example. That they don't tend to spend a huge amount. They can cause a lot of disruption, for example. So the income you generate versus what you have to, the local community has to go through, it's not quite in balance. Whereas like digital nomads, if you attract the right segment, generally speaking, digital nomads, they do tend to stay there longer. They do tend to embed themselves. Intercultural understanding is part of a motivation of why they're there. They want to spend some longer time in the country, maybe learn a little bit of the local language or get to know what makes the locals tick. So I think that's also my understanding. It'd be interesting to see how this plays out over time. I think we spoke about the segments, for example. That was one of the ones we spoke about before. I'd like to get your take as well on that recent Skift article that I opened the session with about how American Airlines, had more or less said about 20 to 25% of travel was bleisure travel, like mixed between business and leisure, pre-pandemic, and now it's close to 50 to 55%. I suppose two questions I have for both of you on this. What's your take on that? Is that a surprise? And then the second question, related one, is how big do you think this market actually is? So just give or take, I know the recent numbers, when I've been looking at it a couple of years ago, about 1.2 billion travelers every year. I mean, how big is this kind of remote work / work from anywhere / digital nomad market? So two questions. What's your reaction to the statistics and how big do you think the market is? Maybe Mark, do you want to kick us off?
Interesting. I would have to worry that it's not a blip at the moment, because all the employers around the world said, listen, as long as you keep doing your job, work from home, I don't actually work from anywhere, you're okay. But now they're starting to bring them back. And And then it's like, but so what? People are still traveling. Okay, does it really matter that much what we call these travelers when you're an airline and you have a limited supply of things? It might be if you're trying to retail and sell them, you need to choose marketing packages that are a little bit different. And that's a harder segment to get to. But, perhaps it has an impact on the number of business seats versus economy or premium economy sort of seats. There might be some product changes at airlines. I actually see there's more changes required at the accommodation industry across the world to come up with product that suits these remote workers more than airlines.
It's a bit like that mixture of what Hans been talking about mixing the co-working space and a hotel. I mean, how about you, Hans? How was that a surprise for you? And how big do you think this market is, let's say?
Well, the thing is, there are a few things going on. So first of all, 20 years ago, I was working for a European hotel chain, and for me, it was normal to fly every Tuesday to Madrid for a 2-hour meeting, which was basically a big waste of time. I think we know a lot of people actually have been doing this, and that is gone. So what happens, and what we currently see, is that people, instead of frequent trips, they start to bundle their trips. So they stay for longer periods, and they come to Zoko not for 1 or 2 nights, but they stay for a week. And given the fact that they are a week, they say, okay, how cool is it that I also can experience a little bit of Amsterdam instead of flying in and do my work and flying out. So that's something that we actually see, that the social part and the cultural part becomes far more important. And it's also, I think, a given, especially by younger generations, that what we also hear, and was also the conversation about salary, for example. So I'm from a generation, we work hard, and if you work very hard, which is not so nice, then you can buy some pleasure. While that generation says, why should I take this circle and go straight for more pleasure and try to combine those two different things? And that's also something which is a big shift that I see happening as well.
Yeah, especially amongst the younger generations and how they see it as well. This is actually from Tanya. She talks about the environment, like the bucket list nomad. Booking.com's recent survey showed 81% of travelers are looking for sustainable stays. Everyone avoids a destination for lack of off-season flights and whatnot. So there's a sustainability angle as well coming into it. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But maybe come back to one of the questions that we had earlier on as well, Hans. Within Zoku, how are you seeing the evolution of travel across the Zoko network over the last few years, and in terms of how you design the hotels? You spoke about, for example, building in co-working spaces. I'll give you an example. I went to what I thought was a co-working space recently. It was called Yayam in Lisbon, and when I went there, they said, no, we're not a co-working space. We're a membership community, where it just happens that you can actually work remotely from if you want, or you can sit down, you can have a glass of wine, you can go for a swim in the pool or whatnot. I was like, it was for me, I was jarring it. I was like, you're okay, sorry, I thought you were a co-working space. No, we're a community first and foremost, and then afterwards we're a co-working space. Can you translate that to us, how you're seeing this evolution within Zoko and where this is going to go?
Well, you can label it in different ways, but obviously we have integrated a co-working concept. However, it's because of members. So we have members here. They basically get a membership per month. We also sell day passes for people who want to work here. But also what we've now been confronted with for the first companies that said, okay, I actually cancel the lease of my office. I'm going to work from home. And next to my home, with my entire team, I buy in memberships within Zoku, and even can I put my company address in the same address as Zoku? That's currently what's happening. So there are big shifts going on. Actually, how you label them, whether you call them membership or co-working, what you see is that people want to mix business and leisure, and also need the facilities for that. So when I did my own tour, I often found hotels with lousy Wi-Fi, or a big bed and no desk in the room, or in the public areas, no proper working facilities. And I think it's very much interesting to dive into this community. I had 150 conversations with them, not actually what do you want, but it's a very nice question if you ask people what frustrates you when you're living and working internationally, and we try to solve all those issues one by one in this concept. So that's why I think a lot of people who actually come here to live and work and really mix that, they love it because first of all the functionality is there, but apart from that, the community is there. The biggest problem that we found when I did the research among 150 people is that if you are in a city that you don't know, where you don't speak the language, the biggest problem as a digital nomad is this kind of loneliness feeling, and that's something isolation, and that's what we are very good at. So where all the hotels say our business model is putting a head in the bed, we say we want to enable people to connect and grow. That's a different ballgame.
Oh, I love that. So rather than bed and let's say head in the bed, connecting and growing. Love it. That's a deep one, Hans, and I think it's one not to gloss over. I think it really captures beautifully that evolution and what you guys have done well. And Mark, helicopter view, digital nomad. What general tips do you have for being a digital nomad? I mean, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned?
I think what isn't getting enough airplay right now is what a privileged position it is to be a digital nomad, to have a job or a half-decent business, cheap airfares. I won't say cheap accommodation because it's going up at the moment, but really, it's not that bad having all these opportunities to explore more of the world. Now, we don't want to get worried about the colour of our bedroom when we've got the colour of people's culture to go and explore. I think there is this magnificent opportunity at this period of your life, and a lot of nomads won't continue for their whole life as nomads. But right now, get out and enjoy the world, get out and meet people, get out and network. Don't stress about the first world problems about, catching the bus at the wrong time or whatever it is. Just don't stress about the little stuff. Get out there and get into the world and meet people.
You know what? I think reflecting on it as well for me, you've set it up beautifully. I would actually say, funny enough, that I do think that there actually, funny enough, is an opportunity to still do some element of international remote work. Even, for example, when you get a bit older and you've got kids, we're finding it ourselves now. There's great companies such as Boundless Life. I'm going to put them up here. That what they do is they organize packages for families. So families of remote workers plug into kids' education on the international Finnish system, for example. So they're a very different segment. You guys are very different markets compared to them. But I think that's an interesting one that, on the one hand, you had digital nomads that moved around from place to place. They were typically young. They were typically single. They didn't have a house back at home. Typically, they were able to move around. And they were typically contractors or maybe, like you said, had a small startup. Whereas now, for me, I'm fascinated to see in terms of the market, yes, that you'll still have that part of the market. But I also suspect that market of people, for example, that have a base in the US, but maybe just want to, for 3 months a year, travel abroad, including bringing the kids if they want, for example. Yes, it's not a digital nomad in the classic sense, but it's certainly availing of that international remote opportunity.
You do have to be very careful about stereotypes. When you get onto the ground and you see people and meet people face to face in these communities, you start realizing. Look, so I'm about to turn 58. Okay, I travel with my co-founder, with my dog. I've done 6 countries this year, 14 countries last year. We've had all sorts of problems crossing borders with COVID and all this sort of stuff. But you roll with it. And I can tell you, I can turn up at these accommodation places we stop at, and I'm rarely the oldest person working there.
Interesting.
I feel it sometimes. The age group is everywhere. It's not an age related. It is not demographic related. It is psychographic.
Yeah. Well, I think you've made a good point. I think it was when I saw the reason I said it was there was a recent Skift article that had said, "Oh, this is a typical profile of the journalists." But you're absolutely right. I found the same myself as well. There's a much wider, diverse array of people, all different shapes and sizes and ages and whatnot that are there. So it's a very, very important point to remove our biases that we might have. Mark, very, very good point there. Mark, can you tell us, what's your sense of the future of hotels over the next coming years, and where does work from anywhere fit into this? You mentioned before how Zoku was early, and now it's of the right time. But where does it go from here? How does it look 5-10 years out from here?
I'm going to let Hans do that because I think
sorry,
he's
Hans.
doing a
Apologies,
great
sir.
job, and obviously he doesn't want everybody copying him, but what he's doing is fantastic.
It was my bad. Actually, it was meant for a question meant for Hans. Sorry.
It's such a pity because I was so much interested in what Mark was. No, I mean it's not that complicated. So what I've currently seen is hospitality is a very slow adapter towards new developments, and it's very simple. I mean, if you talk to this target audience and just what they need, and also understand that they might need different things, and you cannot make everybody happy. But just for example, I give you an example. Salesforce, they recently closed a long-term lease with a hotel that will be fully focused on team gatherings of Salesforce. So if you look to the team gathering segment, there will be a lot of things happening over there. Safety Wing is a fully remote company. They also have certain needs to facilitate their people to work. There's also an opportunity here. I always say also to my team, you cannot be half pregnant. So if you want to make sure that people are actually going to your place and also are prepared to price for the value they get, you have to do a very proper job. And it's not like if you just put a purple chair in your lobby that you're a boutique hotel. That's also the case that you are just having only proper Wi-Fi. Then you're the ideal space for work from anywhere. What we try to do here is just make sure that the place from a functional point of view works very well. But if, for example, we want to solve the issue of that people feeling isolated, that means every long stay that actually stays with us gets a check-in chat. That's not a 5-minute conversation, it's a 20-minute conversation where we actually learn to know you when you're coming. Then we also introduce you to a few members working here and also a few staff people. So that means it's like going to a cocktail reception on your own. If you don't know anybody, you don't go. If you know a few people, it's already getting easier. So it's basically helping people to cross the bridge. Currently, there was a little bit of noise behind me because we organize every afternoon fika, which is a Swedish ritual for our members and our guests with free pastry and coffee so they can easily connect. We organize every week a free community dinner where we invite people who just arrived to come together. And then already in your first week, you already met 9 different people, which you can be sure that if you like it, the 3 to 4 people are already your friends. So really building this kind of social structure. That's something else than arriving at a hotel at a big reception desk, filling out a lot of forms, then get a room key and then go up to your room.
Moving beyond the purple chair. I love that concept. I love that concept, Hans. We are actually curious. What's your favorite Zoku hotel and what's your favorite NomadStays destination, guys? Can you give us maybe Hans? You start us off on that. I know that it's like asking what your favorite child is, but give it a go.
That's a good. I have one child, so that's a pretty easier question to answer. To be quite frank, I mean, if you look to the product itself, they're all comparable. It's a little bit what you're looking for in the city. So, for example, and that's why I'm very much destination focused, because the products in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Vienna, they are different, but I really could not choose between the quality level or the favorite.
Yeah. It's more like what you want from the destination. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Exactly. However, we are absolutely at some point would love to set up a Zoku in a rural area, because I still feel there's a lot of opportunity over there, not only in the cities, but also in more natural areas where I definitely, or in the forest or close to the sea, where I also see a Zoku coming as well. And about my favorite destinations for work, I mean, there are a few in Asia, there are a few in South and Central America. Sometimes it's a rural place, sometimes a little bit holiday. I also like Tulum, but then a particular part of Tulum, not the very busy party space. So in any case, I like to, and it also depends a little bit what you're looking for. Every now and then for if we develop a strategy at Zoko, I would love to work for a week in full silence. But if I want to be inspired, I would love to stay for 3 weeks in Marrakesh or in one of the other big and interesting cities in the world.
Yeah, I found the same. I literally recently I had to go work in an algorithm, and I just said to Dee, look, could I just get away for just do 3 days of deep work? And it was great. Just I rented a place up in Erris area, 3 days, and was just at peace and calm and serenity. But exactly like that, I guess it really does depend on the motivation, let's say. I'm also seeing as well here a nice comment from Christy as well, Mark. She felt the same as you, both of them in their late 40s, early 50s as well. I see also here another question. Any advice on tackling loneliness for digital nomads who are not interested in working from co-working spaces and prefer to work privately from their accommodation? Any tips on that? I mean, I guess that is where the Zoku model of being able to integrate in the community and the catch-ups and the connections in to the accommodation is very, very important. But do you guys have any advice on that, on tips to try and tackle that loneliness side of it?
Yeah, it's a shock to the system. It hasn't been helped with COVID over the last couple of years and losing employment and things like that. I would hope that we'll find more hoteliers and hospitality people modify their product a bit like Hans has been doing by running events for their members. And I say members, they're not really guests, because when we're staying at a NomadStays, this is our home for a while. We're not just there for business. It's not just a bed for the night. It's our home. And I want to know the neighbours. It might be in the next. Well, I actually live in a hotel of some sort of shit. There's 7 rooms on this farm stay out in 20 hectares in the French countryside. This is my permanent home. I want to know who's moving in next door for the next couple of nights or couple of days, and we want to engage. So this can be encouraged by the hospitality managers in the properties. It can be encouraged with, some towns are using things like concierges. Now, they're town concierges. They welcome you. The chambers of commerce have got meetups, the Rotary clubs, things like this that the British systems had a long time. There are groups that will welcome foreigners in quite regularly. And I think there's an opportunity for those community-minded groups to reach out to new people who have made it their home, whether it's a month, whether it's a year, but to bring in the mixture of ideas, culture, knowledge, skills, all those things that comes when you smash people together and say, get to know each other.
Yeah, I love it. I'm coming back to that other question I asked. What about your favourite NomadStays destination?
I was avoiding that one.
That's why I came back. I know it's a hard one, but feel free to
John,
2 or 3.
I'm a nomad. I like discovering new things. I like discovering new people. It's the people that make the difference in almost all the situations. When you go somewhere twice, we were talking before, I was in Lisbon 5 times last year. Every visit was different, even in the 1 year. It's about gathering memories and experiences and friendships. That's the thing that you get out of the world when you're a nomad.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I will ask you the last question is, so if you could work anywhere in the world, where would it be, just in terms of countries or destinations? But before I do that, any other predictions that we haven't covered that you want to mention, or that I've forgotten, or anything else before we kind of, let's say, round it off? Maybe Hans, anything else that I have maybe missed out on that you want to cover?
Well, I think, and maybe I can also, if you allow me to briefly get back on the question of Christy, because I actually like the question. I think that, so the interesting part of hotels is, suppose you have a 200-room hotel and it's fully occupied, and you have a lot of people with a lot of backgrounds, cultures, whatever, but they hardly ever interact. And everything within those hotels is not focused on interacting. So it's basically educating our industry how to actually facilitate interactions. That's one. Secondly, if you choose to stay, so I love Airbnb, great company, great concept, but at the same time, if you are choosing for an Airbnb as a remote worker, actually you're on your own in that unit. So that's why, if you really love to have connections, then just take away as many hurdles as you can to easily interact with people. And that's, for example, that's why we have all those community events, to make it easier for people to interact there. interesting thing here is that we always talk about either travel or labor in this conversation. But I think that the borders between offices and hotels and travel are actually going to disappear. So I feel that the traditional office is also dead. I mean, why would you go 8 hours per day, even 1 day per week to the office to sit behind your laptop? So everything, there will be a kind of a hospitalization of real estate and also offices, where I feel bigger companies, they will create certain hives in cities or in rural areas where people fly in and out, stay there for a few days, a few weeks, come together and basically make sure that the social aspect is very important, the collaborative aspect is very important, the onboarding, the sharing aspect is very important. So the evolution will continue. That's really what I expect.
That's why that article, that Skift article, we'll put it up in the show notes afterwards as well. It talks a little bit about that great merging and what's happening with all that. I think the intersection of but I think the way you've put it, the way the hospitality, hospitalization, whatever the word is, to try and see how that impacts the office, how it impacts travel, how it impacts hotels. I'm really fascinated to see how that plays out. I have to say, it's been such a brilliant discussion. I've really, really enjoyed every moment of it. And as per usual, the time flies by. You've been fantastic guests. I will ask you one last question. Country-wise, you can work in any place in the world. Where would it be, and why?
Well, I want to go down to Alaska, not Alaska. I want to go to Antarctica. I want to be sitting there on the Antarctic continent working away, because I haven't been there yet, and it fascinates me. And I don't like the cold, but there's a whole continent I haven't discovered. There's whole communities down there I haven't discovered yet. So for me, that's on my challenge list.
Yeah, I love going to new places as well. Myself and Dee are the same. Just adding to the bucket list, new experiences, new cultural experiences, experiencing new places. Iceland for us is one of the places we'd love to go to at some stage. There's so many more. But how about you, Hans? If you could work from anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
I think I also would choose for the basically natural areas. I mean, New Zealand, I've been there before. I would love to go there. Uruguay is also kind of a country where I had great experience. Patagonia, I would love to work there. I mean, for a while. But at the same time, also there are certain cities that I want to visit as well. So for me, it's a little bit difficult to make a choice, because if I choose for one, I think, but the other one is also very much interesting. So there are plenty of opportunities. And in any case, I like also the conversation that it's not linked to being 25. I also would love to integrate work from anywhere more as well myself, as leading a company. And I'm also going to make sure to do that in the next few days, and definitely will reach out to you guys to give me the best tips.
Super. Well, listen, thank you so much, both of you, Mark and Hans. What I love is that you guys really, you can see from this conversation, you're at the cutting edge of this and have so much experience and insights that will help point the direction of where this is going to go. So thank you so much for being generous with your time. Thanks also to the audience, all of you, for all your questions and engagement. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it, guys.
Wonderful. Well done, John. Thank you.
See you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.